All right, everybody. We are just going to get started here. My name is Brad. So thankful to have you with us. The church that I am thankful to lead, Community Fellowship, had to call off gatherings this morning due to inclement weather. Hey, Miss Susie Woods, how are you? Kelsey Davidson, look at that, teenagers getting up here to get involved in a Bible study early on a snow day. Thank you very much. I won't be able to shout out everybody, but with us, Josh Jackson. Good to see you, Josh. Miss Kay. So we got lots of folks coming in. Here's what you're going to need. By the way, I'm casual, relaxed, wearing a hoodie, barely comb my hair. Got snow outside, as you can see. And so here's what you'll need. I invite you to grab your Bible. Paper Bible's awesome. If you want to use your phone, that might be hard if you're watching this on your phone. But we are going to be in the Scripture. We're going to be in the book of Exodus. And hey, Miss Terry, howdy. Hey, Danielle and Andrea. Nice to see Miss Carla and Peggy. So here's what we're going to do. Well, we're going to watch this. I encourage you to share it right now. Share it to your Facebook wall. There'll be other people that will join in because of that. I miss all of you that we would have worshiped with this morning at Community. So together, here's what we're doing today. We're going to take a moment. It won't be real long. There's a joke in our house about whether I can do this in 10 minutes or so. Probably a little longer than that, but not much. Hey, Kelsey and Julie and Tyson. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab our Bibles. We're going to open it up to the book of Exodus chapter 2. We're looking at the story of Moses, and we're going to learn about the 2 words, right? 2 words is a series. Life change is what we focused on. And I've said this before. I'll say it again. One of the biggest reasons why we're doing this series, hey, Sharina, is that I'm concerned that sometimes we can do church stuff. We can do routine spiritual stuff. And if there's no like miraculous, amazing, beautiful life change, we're not always surprised. We sometimes, I think, to our fault, do not have the type of expectation that says, you know what, I believe in God. I trust in God. And by doing so, I don't want to just get to go to heaven. I believe that I'm living my life as a part of his kingdom, and I trust him. And so that's ultimately what this series is about, is realizing that God is in the business of interacting with us, all for his glory and our joy. And so here's where we are. Exodus chapter 2, 7 and following tells the story of Moses. Hey, Heather. Nice to see you. Eric, Beth. Moses in Exodus chapter 2, this is a story of him being floated down the river. And here's what basically has happened. You've got an evil king, the Pharaoh, who is scared to death of a Hebrew boy raising up and taking over his kingdom, taking things from him. And so he issues a decree that all of the boys of the Hebrew people would be killed. He wants them gone. And a few of them escape. The midwives who were supposed to kill them don't. Baby Moses is born. Then the military goes out and are told to throw the babies in the river, in the Nile, and drown them. And so something really cool that Moses' mom did is that she put him in a floating bassinet, basically a basket, floated him down the river in such a way God's providence worked in his life, and he floated right into the arms of Moses' daughter. Pharaoh's daughter. And Pharaoh, like a lot of daddies, probably had a daughter or many daughters who got their way. And in this particular situation, she did. She decides, I'm going to keep this Hebrew baby. I'm going to raise him. And in a real interesting turn of events, what happens is that she reaches out trying to find a Hebrew woman who could nurse the baby until he is old enough to be weaned. And she ends up with his actual birth mother being able to raise him. Here's what the story says. Exodus 2:7. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call you a nurse, a wet nurse, from the Hebrew woman to nurse this child for you? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give him your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. So in other words, she gave away Moses, trusting God. Moses was rescued by God into the hands of Pharaoh's daughter. And then God, in his sovereignty, brings the baby back to his mom for her to raise him. Such a beautiful, really awesome thing. So kind of first point of the day, what we have to remember is our obedience to God does not necessarily mean that we will suffer. Oftentimes what happens is that when we trust God, he finds a way to bring blessing into our life that's unexpected, that isn't even what we were trying to find or isn't even what we were looking for, but it is what he saw, it is what he knew, and it is what he does. And so we live life trusting him, desiring to bring honor and glory to him, and following his guidance and his direction. So now here's what happens to Moses in his life. He is raised as a grandson to Pharaoh, and ultimately one of his brothers would have become the next Pharaoh. And some things happen. As a young man, he observes an Egyptian male mistreating a Hebrew male, beating him up, harming him. And in defense of his genetic people, he jumps in and he kills the Egyptian. He hides the body. He tries not to get caught doing that. He's worried that it will jeopardize his relationship with the Pharaoh, and all is good. And he doesn't get caught. But then shortly thereafter, he sees two Hebrew men fighting, and as he tries to break them up, one of them says, "What are you going to do? Kill us like you did the Egyptian?" And all of a sudden, Moses realizes that his story is out. He has not been able to keep the secret, and so he flees Egypt in fear, trying to get away, trying to get to a place where Pharaoh will not, pay him back for killing one of his soldiers. When he gets there, some interesting things happen. It's a really cool story, actually. There's a man named Reuel. He is a priest there in Midian. He has 7 daughters. Moses is running out of Egypt, getting away. He meets the 7 daughters. There's a story about some other shepherds not being nice to those women and mistreating them, and Moses, who at this point has become quite accustomed to fighting, apparently, basically steps in and forces those shepherds to let these women water their flock. They go back home to Daddy Reuel and say, "Hey, you got to meet this guy we met." The dad says, why didn't you bring him with you? Moses ends up in Reuel's home where over time he ends up marrying one of Reuel's daughters, and he makes a life for himself there outside of Egypt. So now Moses has 3 families. He has his birth family, he has his adopted Egyptian family, and he now has his wife's family. So he's got all 3 of those relationships going for him. And the next big thing that happens in his life is the story that we call the burning bush. Exodus 3, 4 through 7, Moses is working the flock of his father-in-law's animals. And it says this. It says, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called out to him out of a bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." And then God said, "Do not come near. Take your sandals off, because the feet where you're standing is holy ground." And he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face. He was scared. He was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, and a land flowing with milk and honey." Hey, Brian. Hey, Uncle Paul. Hey, Miss Hazel. So lots of cool things happening here. And I think if we could maybe take away a thought there, one of the thoughts is that sometimes from our perspective, it appears that someone is winning because they are forceful, because they are able to seem like they're in charge. So from human perspectives, we would have thought, Egypt is winning because they are the ones with the power. They are the ones with the human authority. But what is happening underlining, kind of what's happening under all of that, is the spiritual power, spiritual authority. What you have to understand is that Egypt is not in a good place here. So even though they are asserting their power and their authority at the moment, they have offended the God who created all things, and they have harmed and hurt his people. And the scripture says that God heard the crying, the suffering of his people, and he was preparing to do something about it. So you see, sometimes it might seem like someone is winning or something is, overpowering another, and we can forget that the sovereign power of the creator of the entire world is working toward the redemption of all things, and is working toward hearing the cries of his people, and is helping in those things. So interesting story. Moses asks God what his name is. It's a pretty famous phrase. God says, "I am that I am." or I am who I am. I am that I am is a literal translation. The whole point there is to say, I'm not going to give you my name in a way that you can try to control me. You see, it was kind of a folklore understanding among these pagan peoples that if you knew a God's name, you could control them, similar to the idea of a genie and a lamp. So God makes it very clear from the beginning that you're not going to control me. I'm going to lead you. And I think that in and of itself is one of the primary things we get from this story. Is Moses is being raised in an Egyptian world where they attempted to use the power of deities, albeit false deities, to try and better their human agenda. And in this case, very clearly, God says, I don't exist to further human agendas. I exist to reach out to the humans that I've created, helping them get on board with my godly agenda. That's actually a really good message that we as Americans could hear right now. You see, oftentimes, and hear me carefully, it doesn't really matter what political perspective you're coming from or where you live or what your skin color is. Many people want to use God and the Bible and the story of Jesus and redemption ultimately to get what they want. They want to make sure God's on their team so that they get what they want. And that's what oftentimes the Egyptians and even some of the Hebrews did. And God's making very clear through Moses that I'm not here for your agenda. I'm not here to do what you want. I would love for you to get on board with my agenda. And in this story, God's agenda is to bring freedom to the enslaved Hebrew people who were being mistreated by the Egyptians. So if I go on down to Genesis 4, and I keep kind of telling the story, Genesis 4, verse 1, if you're reading along in your own Bible, good place to go, says, Then Moses answered, But behold, they will not believe me. They won't listen to my voice, for they will say, The Lord did not appear to you. And the Lord said to him, What is that in your hand? This is a really cool story, by the way. Moses says it's a staff. And God says, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. I would have too. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and he caught it, and it became a staff again in his hand. That they may believe that the Lord, the God of the fathers the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has appeared to you. Again, the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. So God is basically empowering him to make very clear that he is speaking on behalf of God. Put your hand in your cloak. So he did. He put his hand inside his jacket pocket, basically inside his cloak. And when he took it out, his hand had become leprous like snow. Then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak. And he put it back inside his cloak. And when he pulled it out, it had been restored and was perfect like the rest of his flesh. He says, if they will not believe you, God said, or if they will not listen to the first sign, they will believe the second sign. So what do we get from the life-changing story in Moses? What's happening here? A couple of things that we need to really deal with. The biggest point of the day is when bad things happen, God can use those to make you better. When we understand God's sovereignty, when we trust God's direction, and when we realize that God's point or purpose may very well be different and greater than any point or purpose we had, in the long run, we can trust God to take us through difficult or challenging things and do wonderful things with them. Let me tell you something. If you live with that type of assurance, knowing that whether today is a good day or a bad day, ultimately knowing that God is a good God, He loves you, He knows you, He's working your life out to be what He created it to be. And no matter whether the thing you're facing today is positive or negative, you can live it, you can experience it with a kind of faith that gets you beyond the immediate emotions of today into a trust relationship with God where you ultimately become the person that He created you to be. So there's a couple of things we want to take away from this. Maybe some of these might speak to you. One, God is not impressed with human power. I don't care. Hey, Don, good to see you, Miss Nancy. I don't care if you are the best looking or in the best shape. I don't care if you are the most attractive, if you have the most money. I don't care if people listen to you more than they listen to other people. I want you to be very clear. God is not impressed with human power. Human power in and of itself is completely and totally secondary to the type of authority and power that God Himself yields and has. And it's actually the goal that God has to help humanity understand that we shouldn't be trusting in our authority, in our power, in our abilities. We have to trust in His. Secondly, God keeps His promises. It would take a lot longer than I have this morning to remind and refresh all of you on this, but the Hebrew people were not just a people that God liked or maybe favored. They were a group of people that God had promised. God promised something to them. And even though that promise doesn't always come in the timing that they would have wanted, maybe God's promises don't show up in the timing that you would want, I want to be very clear to you to say that without a doubt, God keeps His promises. So, the next thing you need to know is that God will use you to elevate His name. I am that I am. God will use you to elevate His name. You see, you listen to the TV preachers, sometimes they'll make you think that God is all about elevating your name, that God is your genie, your power to reach your destiny, to reach out and get what you deserve, what you want. And there are lots of people reading Christian books, so we can call them that, as if they are self-help focused. And I want to be really clear. God will use your name to God will use your life, your experiences to elevate His name, to bring Him glory, to bring Him the thing that He's created the world to have. And in the long run, what is tricky is that bringing God glory is your greatest purpose, which means that it is also the thing that brings you the most joy and love. The next thing you should know is that God uses the willing. Moses was not especially powerful. Moses was not especially impressive. Moses was willing. That's so important. Moses is willing. Now, if I could take just a second about this to tell you that, I find that one of the great things the enemy is doing in our world today is creating ways, cultures, environments where people are less and less willing. They're busy. They're strapped for cash. They're worried. They're filled with anxiety. And all of those kinds of things affect our willingness. When in reality, what God's looking for is not that you be, my dog's sitting beside me here. God's not looking for someone to be perfect. God's not looking for someone to have it all figured out. God is not looking for the person with the best plan. God is looking for the person with the willing heart. My question for you is, how willing are you really? Are you looking to connect with the church, to connect with ministry in some way because it will benefit you, elevate you, make you feel the way you want? Or are you looking for an opportunity to be willing to simply say, God, I'll do what you want me to do? It's kind of a pastor joke when for the last 25 or 26 years now that I've been in leadership in the church, every now and then, you send out opportunities for people to serve. And if it's organizing an event or something, there will be, say, 10 different things people can choose. Like check, yes, I want to be in the band. Check, yes, I want to cook the food. Check, yes, I want to work with the kids ministry. But you always put one at the bottom that is basically, I will serve wherever I'm needed. And I'll tell you something, I love people who check that box. And the reason is that they're not in any way in for just getting to do what they want to do. These are people who are saying, for that day, for that moment, in this situation, I'm willing. Show me where I can help. Show me what I can get involved with. So be willing. God is looking for the willing. He uses the willing. If you remember from the story I read, God used something as simple as a man's walking stick or his hand inside of his cloak to make a point. You don't have to have all these amazing tools to be used by God. You just have to have a willingness, okay? So the next thing I want you to think about today is that God will use you to do things that you don't think you can accomplish. In fact, I'd go so far as to say, God will use you to do things that you can't accomplish without Him. There's a common misnomer out there that says that God will never put anything on you that you can't handle, and that's ridiculous. God will put things on you that you can't handle every day. That's the point. You can't handle it. You and I are not supposed to be able to handle it. God will never put something on you that He can't handle. That's the reality. God will never put something on you that He can't handle, which is why when we realize what we're facing today, we chase after the God who can handle it. We find Him, we seek Him, we go after Him, and we respond to His graceful calling, okay? So that's important for you to get, important for you to remember. God is focused on preparing you more than preserving you. A lot of folks, I think, maybe because of the way that we've interpreted love as safety and protection and making sure nothing bad ever happens to those that we love, some of us think that because God loves us, he's just going to preserve us. He's going to make sure nothing bad happens to us. I've had people say, well, I got saved last year and then bad things happened. Well, listen, God is more interested in preparing you than he is preserving you. This is about him helping you change, him helping you grow, excuse me, him helping you become the person that he created you to be. So in this case, he's using Moses. He's changing Moses. He's developing and growing Moses. And in your life, he's developing and growing you. And like in a sport or in health, other things, you don't grow through comfort. You don't grow through ease. We grow through struggle and trouble and difficulty. And God is growing you. He's maturing you. He's helping you become the person you're called to be, that he created you to be. And often that happens because you're going through difficult things that he can handle even if you can't. All right. So I'm winding down here. I know I've done a lot, said a lot in a short period of time. There have been at least 30 of you on here all the time. So thank you guys very much for that. I'll just close out with this thought. I know a lot of us don't like change, but the truth is the essence of the story of salvation, the narrative of God's redeeming us, is a narrative of change. He is changing us. If you thought that you're going to follow Jesus but stay the same, then that's a misunderstanding. And I just want to encourage you to let today be a day when you willingly walk into the change that God has for you. Just willingly walk in. Submit to his will, to his guidance, to his direction, and say yes to whatever it is he's directing or calling you to do. Maybe it's time that your level of willingness goes way up when it comes to serving. Maybe it's your opportunity or your willingness to forgive. It's time to take off with it. Maybe your opportunity to say, yes, God, I will follow through with that relationship that needs to be rebuilt or in some way renewed. Let today be the day that you follow through with God's calling of change in your life. That would be an awesome thing. Now, final thought. For those of you who are regular attenders at Community Fellowship and who would like to give today, I will be blatantly honest and tell you that you guys know that we don't keep a lot of money on hand. We use the money that's given for ministry. For that reason, something like a snow day is a little bit scary for those of us who lead, in that we know that missing a week's offering is not an easy thing to accomplish. Now, we're not scared in the sense that we don't trust God. We have no doubt that God is going to take care of this. But I would encourage you to consider giving online today. Many of you would have given your tithe or your offering today at the worship gathering. We didn't get to have those because of snow. And so I encourage you to do that. Here's what you do. There are a couple of ways. You can go to our website, CFBC, that's Community Fellowship Baptist Church, cfbc.tv. Or you can go to the website we use really often for communicating with our attenders. That is CF Connect, cfconnect.info, info. If you'd like to do that, that would be a great way for you to go and give. Your giving is protected, it's safe, and you can do that today. So for those of you who are regular attenders at Community, or for those of you who watch this video and would love to help contribute to something really amazing like a church, like Community, I encourage you to go to cfbc.tv and click donate and give today. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Bye. Oh, by the way, share this video like crazy. Maybe your friends will enjoy it. Maybe God will use it for their sake. See ya.